Thank you so much for joining today. You are a DACA recipient and a published author, and I know you have such a powerfully profound story. Would you be able to tell us about your journey and how it influenced you to write and publish your books?
Yes, Val, thank you so much for having me on. First and foremost, I'm a big fan of your podcast, so thank you. And yeah, so my Dreamer DACA journey has been a long one. I have been in the United States now, let's see. Oh my God, I'm older now, so I can't say 28 years. It's been 30 plus years that I've been here in the US. But before coming to North Carolina specifically, I was born in Mexico, León, Guanajuato, Mexico. And so whenever I was 2 years old, my family came to the United States. Like many other dreamers out there, it was to find a better life, especially for the kids, right? Trying to get us to get into the public educational system. So at the age of 2 years old, I came to this country and I've been through the public school system. I got a chance to go to the university, specifically UNC Pembroke, East Carolina University, and then 1 year of law school. So that was really amazing for me. But, throughout the time of being at school, I always had my immigration story with me. And so I guess I can touch a little bit on the immigration part of it, and then we'll just see what questions come out of it. But but yeah, so coming to this country was really amazing for us because it gave us an opportunity to have that American dream that everybody talks about, right? And even though we were kind of striving for that American dream, we still missed our family back home in Mexico. And like, I didn't get a chance to really grow up with my family or see my grandmother or grandfather because I got here at such a young age. So I guess the desire of that, like the wanting to reconnect with my roots, is really what inspired me to write my Lupita books. And we'll get into this piece later, but I really didn't know that the Lupita books were actually going to be books. I thought it was just like a healing message that I heard, but then I kept expanding on that message. And then pretty soon our Lupita books came to fruition. So I guess that my immigration story has always been a part of me and it continues to be a part of me, even in the work that I do now, which of course now I work for the state of North Carolina, specifically with public engagement, outreach, and I help develop our language access plans across all agencies.
I love that. It's very beautifully worded, and I appreciate you sharing that. Do you have any words of advice for anyone who might be currently going through something similar right now?
Yeah. So whenever you go through the immigration process, it can be really scary because you're in this country that now this is your home, this is your home country. So there's always that underlying fear of, okay, what if something happens? What if I'm deported? Or what if one of my family members is deported? So I guess one of the things that helped me get through it is to always have faith and wish for something different, right? I was always a big dreamer. So not just in the sense of dreamer, DACA, but I've always dreamt big, always wanted to do something different with my life. And so I would encourage people to continue to dream big and know that if you continue to put your wishes out there, if you have like big dreams, you are capable of reaching them. But the only way that we're going to be able to reach them is if we truly believe that we can accomplish it and we believe that they're meant for us. So I would say to continue to dream big and know that those beautiful things that you're dreaming are meant to be for you. It's just that fear is kind of crept in there. So one of the things that I've done with my life is essentially I realize fear is here. Okay. And I'm like, I know it's here. But if I focus on fear, I will only get fearful outcomes. And so what I talk a lot about is I flip it. So instead of focusing on the fear, the part that scares me, I flip it and I say, what is it that I want to see in my life? Well, I want to see myself being a legal citizen of this country. I want to see myself working for the state, one of the state departments, and giving them a different view on things, right? Specifically with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, like, I dream big, I envision myself there, and then I know I'm capable of it. So I think as long as we continue to do that, know that it's possible for us, I think that you'll be on the right track.
Absolutely. I love that. And I know you mentioned previously that before you started writing your books, you were at a little bit of a crossroads. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah, I think before you do anything really awesome, you're always at some kind of crossroads. It's funny, but I really do believe that's true because I feel like it's the universe letting you know, okay, this is a moment of change. You can either be afraid of the change and hide and not do anything about it, or you can actually do something loving about it and just go full on, right? Give it 100% energy. So this was during the time where I was going to law school. And to be completely honest with you, Val, I was going to law school because I thought it was the right thing to do. It's kind of what was expected of me. So before doing the work that I do now, I worked a lot on different political campaigns. And I saw that most of the successful people that I knew went to law school. And so I said, okay, in order for me to be successful, I need to go to law school and I need to be good at it and I need to like it. But very quickly, I realized that that wasn't for me. Law school isn't for everyone, especially if you're a creative spirit like me. It's not the best place for you. So I didn't do very well, to be honest with you. And it was really tough for me because it was during this time also that I was approved to go to Mexico and essentially have an opportunity to get my residency and come back to the US, but it wasn't guaranteed. So basically, I was in this place where I'm trying to do law school, I'm trying to focus on this while also knowing that I have to leave the country and see if they're going to let me back in. And so it was a really tough time. And one day I had like this, like almost like a breakdown moment. And the only thing I could think was, I just want to go to the computer and go to a blank sheet of paper on my Word document, right? And I went to the Word document. And the phrase that I felt and heard within me was Lupita and the magic of Mexico. And when I heard that, when I felt it within me, like the idea and this connection, when I saw that, I felt so at peace. And I felt like, wow, this is really a beautiful phrase. What a beautiful phrase. So I wrote it in there, but I didn't know it was going to be a book at the time. And that's why I find it so interesting because it was the first time ever where I received this like beautiful message in this way that made me feel really good. And so later, I was going through a tough time again, trying to survive law school. I went back to that same piece of paper that said Lupita and the magic of Mexico. And that very moment, I wrote the entire book of Lupita. And it was really cool, Val, because it was the first time that it ever happened to me, but it was at a crossroads. It was where I was so freaked out about everything. But what this did to me was instead of focusing on the thing that brought me fear, for example, being separated from my family, not doing well in law school, I said, okay, what can I say that can be more loving? Because all I had was Lupita and the magic of Mexico. And to me, I was like, oh my God, that feels so good. It feels so amazing. And then I thought of my grandfather who had passed away by then. And I was like, well, I never got a chance to see him. And I also never got a chance to grow up with my abuelita or have really distinct memories of being with my family in Mexico. And so the story that unfolded was a loving one. It was one of unity. It was one where a little girl named Lupita goes back to Mexico and she explores all the magic Mexico has to offer. And this was like a healing work of art is what I call it, because even though I didn't know it was going to be a book, just the writing of it was healing those things that apparently I hadn't wanted to look at for years.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And every time you share it, I get goosebumps, and it's about everything that you've been through. And I know so many listeners can relate. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share, especially when it comes to thinking about pursuing paths that others maybe might expect of us. And I definitely know that I personally can relate to that as well, because before I kind of landed in like marketing communications, I was studying a variety of different things. At one point I was studying nursing, another point I was studying real estate, and I just happened to
My
be
goodness.
interviewing for this job that it wasn't related to real estate, but it's related to social media. I'm like, oh, it sounds kind of cool, you know? And then I applied, and then I ended up just happened to be working in this field. And I'm like, I actually really like this. I think I might want to maybe change paths a little bit. And so, yeah, I feel like some of these things just happen like when we least expect it.
They do. And I love that for you because, yeah, it's like, we think we're supposed to live our life a certain way and please our parents, please our spouses, whatever. And when we live like that, oftentimes we're cutting ourselves off from the things we really enjoy. But you know what's cool? It's like the universe always finds a way to realign you. Like for you, just having that social media interview and you're like, well, I guess I'll just see what this is about, right? But it's like the universe will never let us down. It's always going to be interfering and saying, hey, this is your dream. And I'm going to remind you again. I'm going to remind you again. So it's really cool. And I want to say this because this is what I'm feeling to say is that oftentimes we think, oh no, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done it this way. I shouldn't have done it that way. But I feel like there really are no mistakes in the big picture of things because the universe is always looking out for us. And if we go, like we take a little detour, it says, don't worry, here's a reminder. Don't worry, here's a reminder. So I mean, I guess we just have to enjoy life and be willing to make what some people call mistakes, but just live and enjoy every moment of it and be aware of those beautiful signs that come to us in waking state and, be willing to take that more exciting path.
So true. And it's something that I always find I have to remind myself, especially if I'm going through something difficult. I'm like, it's like that phrase, like the one door closes, another one opens kind of thing. And even though in the interim I'm feeling like, oh, this really sucks or whatever, logically I know like something better is gonna come. I just have to be patient. And sometimes that's difficult, but like I think that knowledge kind of helps navigate that situation.
It does. No, it does. And it can be difficult to just wait because we're like, oh my gosh, like maybe we even feel like we're falling behind. I should be over here and I'm not. But I feel like one thing that's been difficult for me, but I'm finally starting to realize is that sometimes the universe will say, look, take a break. Okay. It'll literally put us in a place where we are forced to take a break because if we just keep going, sometimes we're not really connected to what we truly want to do, right? Like mind, body, and soul. And when it's not all aligned, we just want to do. We just want to do without really feeling. And I feel like the universe is like, let's just pause, realign yourself, and then let's move forward. So I'm practicing, just being in that moment and realizing that this is the moment of growth for me if I just accept it and be willing to learn and look for opportunities.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because I feel like especially in the culture that like we're in, it's a lot of pressure because it's like a lot of go, 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 go and be productive like all the time. And so there's not really a lot of that room for like R&R, rest and relaxation. And so it's like even like if I'm granted with an opportunity like with my past position, I was very burned out. I was tired all the time. But even so, it's just like, okay, next thing, next thing, next thing, next big thing. And it's hard like to kind of navigate that because like, oh, you accomplished something, but then you're always kind of looking for the next big thing rather than appreciating like what you truly have in that moment.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, one of the things I try to remember is to like create a moment of celebration because you're right. It's like we do one thing and we're like, okay, I've really wanted to do this. Then you get there, you do it, and you're like, okay, what's next? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like if we don't create these moments of celebration and these moments of also like recharging our batteries, then I feel like we don't really enjoy it to the fullest because we're just like next, next, next. So yes, let's take some moments of celebration and recharging.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I was reading a book about something similar recently and kind of talking about like the path to happiness. The title escapes me at the moment, but it was basically about I think it was like an unexpected joy of the ordinary or something like that, of like just basically appreciating like what we currently have and just slowing down and allowing ourselves to fully digest that. And I just think it's like so important because it's like we're always like what I like to call the hustle culture.
Oh
And
my gosh,
so
yes.
you can lose sight of that. And I know for me it's happened like many times and it's just like, wow, I'll look back and be like, wow, I really achieved something big, but at that time I was too focused on, okay, what's next?
Yes, yes. And one of the things I like about doing just like this conversation here, because it's like, it's recorded and it's like, okay, let me take my time. Let me take my time. Let me enjoy this time with Val. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about these interviews because it forces you to slow down. And normally I'd be like, hey, what am I going to do? Okay, I got to do this. But this is just like a moment of just connecting with someone and being chill. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that's so true. I need to implement that more because sometimes, like when I'm interviewing folks, sometimes I tend to speak fast and get a little rushed and whatnot. So that's something that I'm always trying to remind myself, like, okay, it's cool. We're just having a conversation, and
Yeah.
But I when I've interviewed folks at my last position, I had people who were really nervous to interview, and it was very very chill and okay, and I'm like, just we're having a regular conversation, you're just telling me about what you do in your role and all that good stuff. So don't feel intimidated. And some of the feedback that I got from them, they said I made them feel really comfortable. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah.
Oh, that's like the best compliment as a host. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit, not entirely too much, but while we're kind of talking about careers and whatnot, um, you're currently offering career workshops for students, which is really amazing. Can you share some of the common challenges that students are maybe facing during the immigration process and maybe the effect on their families and how you might address these in your workshops?
Yeah, so that is a beautiful question because, you know, potentially attending college, that's kind of stressful for everybody, right? But if you're of a community that maybe undocumented, right, there's another layer of concern there. So not only is it having to pay out of state taxes at a lot of the local colleges, but it's also determining if they're even able to apply, right? Because some colleges don't take students that are undocumented. So it's been a real challenge. But one of the things that we talk about during the career workshops are not just the college opportunities, but also how they can be proactive if they cannot attend college. Because one of the things I hear a lot is that funding for college is completely out of the question for their family. So when I hear this, one of the things I explore with them is, okay, what organizations can we connect you with that can be a good resource? So I'm a big person on connecting folks to the resources that they might need. And luckily, with the work that I've done for years now with networking, public engagement, and outreach, I have a lot of contacts and a lot of good friends, right? So I'm able to connect to these students with those resources, specifically if they are undocumented. Now, another thing that I also share with the students during the workshops is opportunities that they can take now. So even if they can't legally work, because oftentimes you want to do an internship, you want to work somewhere to get the experience. Well, if you're undocumented, a lot of the time you can't legally work. So there are a lot of organizations, though, that will still allow you to help them, even if it's a volunteer basis. And some students will say, Carolina, I can't be doing this for free for a long period of time. And I get that, right? We can't be doing that. But it does help you start networking, get your name out there, and also get that different experience that you need, which quite honestly, that's something that I had to do whenever I was trying to go to college. And also because I couldn't work for some time, I had to volunteer. And this really allowed me to network with different people. And eventually they were offering me jobs. They were offering me different career opportunities. So these are some of the topics that we talk about with the kids. But then we also just take a big step back because when we're talking about a career path, whether you're documented or undocumented, it can be stressful to think about what's the right career path for me, right? Students share what we talked about here, like, okay, well, my parents want me to do this. My uncle wants me to do this. And what I do is like I strip them of that for a moment and I'm like, okay, let's pretend mom and dad aren't here. Let's pretend your aunt and uncle aren't here. What is it that you enjoy doing? And we start from that. We start from the little seed of what they enjoy doing. And once they can connect with some of those activities that they enjoy, we build on that. And we're like, okay, these are some potential careers for you to consider. And we start diving deeper into those. And we find that that's really helpful to students because so much of the time you think, okay, I've got to pick a career and I got to do it. And that's it. That's all I'm doing with my life. And the new conversation we're having with students is that no, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life. In fact, you might change careers. You might realize that this isn't right for you, and that's okay. You can pivot, you can change it. So we talk to them a lot about flexibility, realizing that what they like right now may not be something that they like 5 years from now. And of course, we always use examples. So I always use myself as an example because I can be transparent and share with you that when I first went to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that whenever I was a little girl, when I was in kindergarten, I would pray and I would say, Lord, help me go to college. Like for me, that was like my big American dream. I'm like, I don't know how, Lord, but I want to go. And so when I got the opportunity to go to college, I didn't know what to study. So I started with psychology and I found that I loved psychology. I found that I truly, truly loved it. But then because I was involved with politics, I said, okay, let me go to law school because I think I'll like that. Realized I didn't like that, right? But again, we have to remind students that it's okay to experience something and make changes. Make changes as you grow and as you make changes also.
Oh, I love that you mentioned that. It's so beautiful. And it's interesting you mentioned psychology because that's another field I was studying at one point in time because I was just always so amazed and intrigued by like the world of psychology. And I think it actually helped land one of my previous positions because I was taking like child development psychology and abnormal psychology. And I've always been interested in it. And at one point in time, I thought, oh, maybe might want to be a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
And long story short, I don't know. I give the kudos to all of the therapists and mental health professionals out there that can do it, but I don't think I have the capacity to be able to do that. And I think it's for this reason that mental health professionals, they usually have their own therapists as well,
Yeah.
understandably. But I've always been fascinated by it. And I always love the idea of just having like powerful connections and learning about where people come from and different struggles that people might be facing and bringing more awareness to that. So I think I kind of incorporated like a little bit of that into my podcast when I first kind of started it, is kind of bringing that awareness to like these different experiences that we all have. And it kind of like brings us closer together, makes us feel less alone. And I want to kind of go back to what you were mentioning, like with our family members kind of saying this is like what you should do. And I know for me personally, it was like, okay, you need to find a career that pays a good amount of money and you need to go to college. So this is what you do. And so I kind of started off going to college with this, okay, I'm gonna do this. And then kind of like halfway through that curriculum, I was like, I don't really think this is for me. And so I had changed career paths a couple of times. And in total, it took me about 6 years to finish college because of that. I went from, I think, nursing to psychology and I think to real estate. And so I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And it's funny, like I want to say probably the last 2 years is kind of when I went into more of like the business side of things, because that's kind of when I discovered marketing. And I'm like, I really kind of like this. And it's something that I've always really enjoyed doing because I can use my creative side as you were mentioning.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so important to kind of bring awareness to be like, whether someone's goal is to make a lot of money or not, or just enjoy what they're doing. I feel like that both things can be possible.
Mhm.
You can enjoy what you're doing, and if you so desire to make good money, that can happen too. If you like pursue your passions and things like that. It doesn't have to be, I guess, like one dimensional, I guess. Like you have to do this position or that position or whatever. Like this has job security, this does. I mean, there's always like gonna be downsides, but like ultimately, like even if it's like a really stable position, if it pays well and you don't enjoy what you're doing, then is it worth it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that those are conversations that I really enjoy having with the kids too, because they're like, well, my parents say if I do this, that's the way to go because that's what their parents did. And I think we've got to realize that as time goes on, we change, right? And so does the educational system. And quite frankly, I think something that social media has taught us, at least for me, is that you can follow your passion and be successful in it. And you don't need to, do something that you don't enjoy. You can always do something that you do enjoy and it can be profitable, right? But it does take different, I guess, practicing your different skill sets and getting yourself there. But it's definitely a possibility. And I think that changing the conversation, like you're saying, letting kids know this is possible for you. Let me help you. Let's see what kind of skill sets you have. How can we get you resources? How can we support you to make that dream come true? Instead of shutting them down and saying, yeah, no, that's not going to work out because me and my brain, this is what I'm saying based on my experience in my life. No, no, no. That's like outdated. That is completely outdated. And I feel like we need to find ways to encourage them and find those things that they're genuinely good at and that they enjoy doing, right? And uplift those skills so that way, whatever it is that they're doing, they do enjoy it and it can be profitable because they're amazing at it.
I love that. And kind of on that subject, can you share how maybe you inspire students to learn and dream big, and maybe give us a little teaser about your Lupita play?
Oh yes, thank you, thank you. So one of the things that I do with the kids is we call it like the Dream with Me workshop, okay? And so it's an opportunity for them to think about, okay, what is the biggest dream that you can dream for yourself? Now, this can be related to your career. This can be about something that you want to acquire, whatever. It doesn't have any limitations, but the goal is dream as big as you can. Now, what happens during these workshops is that the younger students, they're the ones that are really dreaming big. The older ones have already put those limitations on themselves from what mom and dad said, from what they've learned in school, right? And so it's been really interesting to see that. And what I invite them to do is I say, let's ignore them for a moment. Let's ignore all those things that you've heard before. But if you could do anything that you wanted, what would that be? And when we do that, they either write it down, they can draw it or paint it. And the reason that we do it in different mediums is because every child expresses themselves differently. Some feel really comfortable writing, some want to just speak it and share it with you. Others prefer to maybe make a little video, right? Whatever way that they want to express it, but we open our doors to that because this is a creative space. So whenever they share it, that is a really exciting part because after they're sharing it, everybody does like a huge clap for them because it takes a lot for somebody to share their dream with you. In fact, something that I learned during our first workshops, not many people wanted to share their dream out loud because they were too embarrassed, is what I heard. They were embarrassed and they were nervous. And so what I ended up doing was, okay, I said, I will be the example, right? And I would do like my dream big thing and I'd share it with them. And a couple of them would be like, okay, that's pretty cool, Lupita. And I'm like, I'm still here. Nothing happened to me. Like, I'm good, right? And so we made it a joke. And then I would throw the ball, toss the ball to whoever, right? And whoever caught it, I'm like, okay, now it's your turn. And then they would say it. And we turned it into a game like that because it's really important that the child can envision something bigger, something amazing for themselves. And it takes a step further for them to actually voice it out loud. So this is a really neat and powerful practice. And what I've started doing is not only offering it to the kids, but we also do it, during family night. Because what I've learned too is from doing the family night workshops is that sometimes, like we talked about before, the parents without meaning to will let the child know, hey, let's dream something else. That's probably not a good one, right? But this opportunity invites them to just play a game and it invites the parents to also dream big. So whatever dream mom has, she gets to share it. Whatever dream dad has, he gets to share it. And it's really cool because once families start presenting that and the claps start happening, it encourages other families and then they keep dreaming bigger, dreaming bigger. So it's been so rewarding to see this happen and more than anything, just exciting. So that's kind of like a little snapshot of the workshops. And then the Lupita play, that's a whole different project. And to be honest with you, Val, I didn't think of it. I did not think of it. So what happened was I was doing a book reading for Lupita and her magical dreams. It was a community event at a local bookstore. What's it called? I can't remember the bookstore right now, but it's at a local bookstore. And basically, Revista Latina is an organization I've worked with several times. They came there, they saw the book reading, they saw that we were completely full with families and kids. And they're the ones that said, Lupita, let's do a play. Like, we are ready to support you and do our Lupita play. And so we did because the community wanted to do it. We held our auditions. It was really amazing. And so now what we're doing this year, we have a couple of schools and one college that's interested in doing it, but I can't go and do it with every school. So what we're doing is we're offering the script to the schools and then I will go on opening night and I'll sign the books and we'll have like our little after party. But essentially that's what we're doing with the Lupita play. And it's really neat because we offer the play in English and in Spanish. And then the other unique thing about the play is that instead of just having one Lupita as the main character, we have three and sometimes even four. And the reason I do this is because we want to give different children an opportunity to be Lupita. And I want Lupita to be a representation of, anybody who wants to dream big, anybody who believes in family unity and the energy of love, unity, and peace. And so we on purpose pick a diverse cast of Lupita so that way they represent different people within our community. And that's kind of a good wrap up of the play, but it's been really amazing to work with all of the kids. They're just amazing.
Well, I love that. And I love seeing all of your videos and images on Instagram. Everyone just seems like they're having a blast. And yeah, as you're mentioning, having different kids play with pizza is so important because it kind of fosters that inclusivity. And I really love that.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
let's see, let's pivot a little bit. How did your cultural background shape your understanding of dreams and the later evolution of Lupita and the Magic of Mexico?
Oh, okay. Could you repeat it, Val? Because I think it got cut off a little bit.
Oh yeah, sure. How
Okay.
did your cultural background shape your understanding of dreams and the later evolution of Lupita and the Magic of Mexico?
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, dreams have always been really important to me. Okay, ever since I was little, I had like really vivid dreams, and I'd wake up from my dream and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like this was amazing. And I'd want to share it with everybody, right? And so my dad was the one who caught on and was like, okay, she really has a gift here and she's really obsessed with dreams. And so he started telling me that dreams have a meaning. And he said that what his grandparents told him is that every time you have a dream, it's a representation of how you're doing within, right? Emotionally, how you're doing, mind, body, and soul. And so when he told me this, I really took that to heart and I started really listening and paying attention much closer to all of my dreams. And so what I started doing was like journaling. I would journal them. And at that point, I journaled all of them, the fun dreams, the amazing ones, also the scary ones, because at the time I didn't know how to do it. I just journaled everything, Val. And it was amazing because sometimes I look back at these dreams and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can clearly see like what my state of mind was at the time. So, for example, when I would have dreams where I was lucid, where I was aware I was dreaming and I was creating beautiful things, I knew that I was having a really good time in waking state. Everything was really working out. I was using my creativity to the max, right? And the reason I know this is because when we do that, it reflects in dream state. Now, when I started seeing those nightmares, okay, those nightmares that would come every night, it would really freak me out. But I knew that they were coming because of something that I was doing in waking state or some interaction I was having. And one of the dreams that I would have over and over that would terrify me was about aliens and like um I guess beings from other worlds, other planets, and I would be so afraid, right? But I will say that the fear within these dreams actually helped me because it allowed me to practice waking up within the dream to have that lucid dream and change it. So I'm very thankful actually for those dreams that are uncomfortable. And so because I have all of these dreams and I use them to guide me in waking state, it's always been a huge part of me. And when I started reading our first book, Lupita and the Magic of Mexico, there's one page on there that has sugar skulls and things like that. And one little boy was like, no, Lupita, I think I'm going to get nightmares from that picture. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then other kids started saying, oh my gosh, I've had a nightmare. And like the nightmare talk took over. And so they were just saying how they didn't know why they had nightmares. And Lupita too, Lupita and her magical dreams was really a response to how the kids reacted about potentially having nightmares. Because one of the things that I hear a lot is that when a child says, Mom, Dad, I had a nightmare, this is what I dreamt, the parents usually say, well, don't worry about it. It was just a dream. And the thing is that when we say that to children, we're closing that little window. So when I told my dad, Dad, I had a nightmare, this is what happened, he would never say, don't worry, it's just a nightmare. He would say, okay, Lupita, what were you feeling? Who was with you? What were you doing? Okay. And then he'd help me. He'd help me understand what that meant. And so for me, it's so important that parents do this with their kids. And Lupita and her magical dreams starts that conversation, right? It reminds us that our dreams are a reflection of the self. And if we pay attention to them, we know how we're doing. And then also, if we start doing different things in waking state, things that bring us joy, things that bring us excitement, they will reflect in your dreams. So because of that, I just love using dreams not only to guide me in waking state, but to amplify my desires. And that's what led me to do our third book, Your Dream Guide, which is a more adult version, I guess teens and up, right? But that book basically does what my dad did for me, and it just guides the dreamer so that way they can understand what any dream means to them. Because okay, I'll tell you this real quick, Val. When my mom noticed, okay, my mom noticed that I was really paying attention to my dreams, she was being helpful in her own way because her family never talked about dreams like that, only dad's family. So mom was like, okay, let me get you this dream dictionary. And what did I do? Okay, if I had a dream, I would go to the dream dictionary and I'd find what it meant. And let me tell you something about this book. Okay. it's a good book, but it freaked me out because a lot of the symbolism, they have like a negative interpretation of the dream symbol. So Val, I was constantly like afraid. I'd go through it and I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. And so then I'd expect it. I'd expect something scary in waking state. And most of the time it happens because I was giving energy to that fearful piece. So what I did was I started playing a game with myself. I'm like, okay, I know that if I look up this symbol, it's going to tell me something scary in that book. So instead of looking it up, I'm going to see what did it actually feel like for me? What did it actually mean to me? All right. And then when I would be brave enough to say, this is what I felt it meant for me. And for me, it's actually a positive thing. It's a loving thing. I'd give energy to that. And then loving things would happen. And I kept playing with this concept. And then when I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's because I have my own dream language. The person that wrote that book, that does mean what they think it means, but it's for them. It's reflecting their life, it's reflecting their experience, and mine is totally different. And like you know, Val, I'm a person that I'm very positive. I always look at the silver lining in things. And because of that, I'm like, there is no way that that dream dictionary reflects me. Absolutely not. And so that's what your dream guide does. It helps you understand what the dream means to you based on how you're feeling within the dream and based on your experiences in waking state. So I think that's a good wrap of all the dream stuff.
Oh, thank you for that. I really appreciate all the detail, and I think it's been really helpful for me personally. As you know, we've talked about dreams for ad nauseum, to be honest, and I've learned so much because, like you, like I remember at one point, like probably getting one of those books that it deciphered different symbols and stuff, and I didn't really feel like I really got much out of it. But now it's like it's the last several years, especially learning about dreams has helped me have like a more solid understanding of myself and wants and desires. And while I've had dreams that have been prophetic, because like sometimes it was also scary because if I had like what they call a bad dream, like I'd like, oh, I don't know, is that gonna happen
Yeah.
eventually? And I'm just saying, like, not giving energy to that, because I have found that if there's something like in my life that's really causing me a lot of anxiety and stress, it will present itself in my dream. And so I've actually resolved a lot of conflicts with kind of that knowledge, because I felt that dream has given me a message like, okay, I need to deal with this because obviously it's bothering me on a subconscious level.
Yes.
And I've made amazing connections because of it as well. And as of lately, I need to do better about documenting my dreams, because like I was doing so well for a while, and I'll wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll kind of recall what the dream was, and then I'll go about my day as many people often do. I'm like, ah, man, I missed that opportunity to write it down. So maybe if you could share with us some tips for anyone who maybe wants to get started in learning about their dreams, how they can maybe go about doing that.
Yes, yes. And I'm a big fan of journaling your dreams, okay? And I know some people are not. So here's kind of like a little tip. So for example, I have a lot of dreams, and because of that, I don't always have the energy to do it all in detail like I used to. Now, I will say when I was little, I used to detail every single thing, what I was feeling, the color of things, if there were steps, where were they headed? Like every little detail that I could think of, I would write it down, okay? And I'll tell you something, if you do this, if you do write it down in detail, it will help you recall the dream, number one. But then number two, it encourages yourself to remember them more and more, because what you're doing is you're saying, this is important to me. I'm literally trying to remember every single detail. So if you can do that, fabulous, do it. But if you're like me, and maybe sometimes you get so many dreams, you don't have time to do it, what you do is you just jot down the main thing in the dream. So if you have a dream, so okay, the other night, I had a dream. I'm always dreaming that I'm flying. I'm always flying somewhere, right? So for me, I would put flying in the universe or flying over Egypt, right? I would put that down because that would help me remember the main thing. And when I remember, oh, that's right, I was flying in the universe. Okay, yeah, I remember. It'll all start coming back to you. So if you can just jot down little notes to help you, that'll be helpful. And if you're starting though, at least put the theme and what were you feeling? Okay, what you're feeling is critical because what you're feeling is the reflection of how you're doing within. And then the images and everything that you see there, those are they support, okay? They support the feelings you have within and they give you more detail, okay? They give you more detail specifically to what it is in waking state that you need to connect the dream with. So you can do that. You can jot it down and just take little notes if that's easier for you. And then the last one that I can share with you is you can even do a voice recorder like on your phone. You just put it as a voice recorder. And that is kind of fun because you're able to put more feeling, more emotion into it because sometimes I'll have these dreams where they just feel amazing. I'm looking at things that are so out of this world and I'm just like, oh my God, I have to express this. I've got to say it. And so sometimes I'll record it here. And I said that was the last one, but let me give you one more last one. When you have a really amazing dream, one that makes you feel so, so good, you've got to draw it, you've got to paint it, you've got to bring some kind of creativity to it because what you're doing with that is you're allowing yourself to remember it, but you're reliving it and you're reliving all of those beautiful feelings that you had within the dream. So that again, it's amplifying that beautiful energy. Anytime you have a loving dream and you can amplify the energy by painting, drawing, writing about it, or talking about it with a loving friend, that's what you want to do because that encourages yourself to have more dreams. And Val, can I do one more tip? I just thought of one to help
Oh, for
people
sure.
remember. Okay, thank you. Because I've got a lot, and your dream guide will have all of them in there too. But one that's so easy that everybody can do is set an intention before going to bed. Because some people say that they love to participate, but they can't even remember their dreams. So one quick thing you can do for yourself is just set an intention before you go to bed. Say today or tonight, excuse me, tonight, my intention is to remember my dream in detail. Okay. And you can reword it however you'd like, whatever feels comfy to you, but feel it, say it out loud, have your little hands over your heart, and then go to sleep. Because when we're going to sleep at night, your mind, body, and soul is working. It's doing stuff for you. It's healing. It's growing. It's exploring. So if you want to use that energy to like the max that is possible, set your loving intention before going to sleep. It's going to change how you sleep and it's going to change how you wake up. You're more likely to wake up with loving energy if your intention is a loving one before going to sleep.
Wow, beautifully said. I love that. I always need to have that reminder myself. Usually what I'll do is like in the morning, I have like this like notepad app and then I just kind of like jot down my dream. But maybe I'll try the recorder like if for those moments where I'm like extra sleepy and I just need to get down because it's funny, like as I go about my day, sometimes I feel like I forget, but sometimes like randomly, like in the middle of the day or even at night, even the feelings or the dream itself will just kind of pop back in. I'm like, oh wow, okay, that's what that was about. Or sometimes I'll have residual feelings from the dream, even if I can't remember the dream itself. It was like it actually happened in waking state for me. And so it's just like so profound how dreams just have such a big impact on us.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how you know there's a beautiful connection because you're awake. And even then, you're starting to feel that energy from the dream. And you're right. Sometimes you're just going about your day, and maybe it's something you touched or the way you looked at something, whatever, it'll come up, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the dream. And it's funny when that happens to me at home, I'll tell Jeremy, I'm like, Jeremy, I just remembered my dream. He's like, okay, sugar, okay. Because he hears me say it all the time. But as soon as it happens, Val, what do? I get my phone out and I'm like, oh, that's what it was. That's what it was because I want myself to remember, even though I have a lot of dreams, I love going back and looking at them. Okay. Let me share why. Okay, so right now I can go and I can find one of my journals from when I was little and I read through it and I see how I've grown within the dream world. So back then, a lot of what I'd see would be like animals, beings from other planets. I would be on like, what is it, carnival rides, all these kinds of kid-like things, which was so amazing, so fun. And then as you grow, the dreams change a little bit. And it's really neat to see how your dream world has changed because it's a reflection of how you're changing in waking state too. So it's really neat to go back and read it. And it's kind of nerdy, but it's like dream stories. They're amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And I know you get this a lot, but I know so many folks out there not only struggle with remembering their dreams, but also a lot of people have said that I don't have dreams. And what would you advise someone who's maybe like, I don't dream, or maybe they're not realizing that they're dreaming, or maybe they can't remember. Do you have any words of advice for anyone who might be going through that?
Yeah, I do. And oftentimes people say that, and it's because whenever they were little, they weren't taught how to do this, right? So think about it. If you're little and you have these dreams and nobody thinks they're important, well, you're just going to be like, okay, these aren't important. Let me just leave them to the side. And you start realizing, I don't need these. I don't need these. They're trash. I don't need them. So you don't really remember them. There's no need to remember them if they're of no interest to anybody, right? So it's not your fault, number one, okay? But number two is this. If you can recall a little bit, everybody that says, I don't dream anymore, I remember a dream from back in the day, but I have not dreamt for years. When I hear that, it's very easy. What I say is this. Find that dream, whatever little piece of dream that you have, and write that one down. Okay, write it down and give it weight. What I mean by giving it weight is explore what you were feeling in the dream, the color of things that were in the dream. What were you doing or what were you unable to do? Give it as much weight, as much detail as you can, because when you do this, even though you're not dreaming now, the practice of recalling that dream that you once had and bringing it back to present, you're saying, this is important to me. I want to dream. I want to remember. And now remember this too. It's not that you're not dreaming, but it's really you're not remembering it because of what we said earlier, right? It hasn't been important for you, so there's no need to remember it. And the last thing I'll say is something that you can do. I shared a little example with you earlier, is doing an intention before you go to sleep at night. This is the easiest way to do it, especially if you're on a journey to really understand yourself. Sometimes people say, I'm trying to do better at growing me. I'm trying to do better at getting to know me. Well, the best way to get to know yourself is looking at your reflection of those dreams. Okay, those dreams legit are the most profound versions of you, your deepest desires, the things that you're most terrified of. All of those things are housed within the dreams. They come up in such an amazing way. So if you're on this growth and you're practicing different things in waking state, like meditation or exercising, whatever, this is a beautiful practice you can do at night, is recalling your dreams. Because when you do that, what is it that you're doing? You're essentially uniting yourself, okay? You're working on yourself during the day. And before you go to bed, you're setting that loving intention and you're letting dream state help you. Because if we don't let dream state help us, then we're putting so much effort in waking. If we were to let dream state help us, your desires would be amplified. You would be in a more loving state. I think this is the secret, Val. Let me tell you this. So oftentimes at work and people that I know, they ask me, Carolina, how are you so positive all the time? How are you so happy? Blah, 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 blah. I genuinely think, I really, really think it's because I pay attention to my dreams. And because I know if I have a dream that's bothering me, whoa, loving alert, something's going on in waking state that I'm not bringing loving attention to. Got to make some changes. It's time to do something different. And it's because of those beautiful loving alerts in my dreams that I have a more loving waking state, right? So if you pay attention to your dreams, I can guarantee you you're going to have more loving waking state.
That's so true. And I want to touch on that briefly too, because it's funny. I actually have gotten that a lot too, where folks I actually randomly, I think I was donating plasma one time, and this guy was like, "What are you smiling about?" He's like, "Why are you so happy?" or something like that. And I didn't even realize I was
Oh
doing it.
my
And
gosh.
I get that a lot. And it's funny, in my last position, like we've since become pretty close friends, but one of the guys I work with, he was saying that he would kind of jokingly call me, "There's the happiest girl in the world." And
Oh my gosh, that's so sweet.
yeah, and I'm like, "Oh yeah." He'll be like, "How are you today?" And there'd be kind of like sometimes a joke. I'm like, "Well, I'm not so happy today because X, Y, and Z," or something like that.
Oh.
It's so funny because, like, as you mentioned, it's just like I'm at like, they're like, I deal with like real struggles and on a daily basis like everyone else, but apparently like I walk around and I'm smiling and not really realizing it, and people comment on it, and
Yes.
like, "You're always so happy," and I'm like, "That's not true." I'm thinking internally like, "That's really not true," but I'm just trying to go with the flow and I guess be positive. Maybe kind of unconsciously, I guess I'm doing it, but yeah, I can relate to that a lot.
But you know what's interesting about that, Val? It's like you might think like, oh, okay, I'm not really that happy right now. And maybe you're not that happy. But, okay, and I'm not a big person on comparing people, but I think in this case, it will help us. But if we compare to maybe other people who don't listen to their dreams and aren't as connected to their subconscious in that way, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So something that's really challenging to them, you might not think it's that challenging. You might be like, okay, yeah, I see it, but I also see a loving solution. And if I don't see it right now, I know that I will have a loving solution because I know that's how it works for me. Everything's always working out for me, right? So you have that kind of solid structure to you, that solid knowing that other people might not. So for them, they look at you and like, everything's so easy for this girl. She's always so happy. What's her secret? I want to know. Okay. So maybe if they did some of these practices, they would also be a part of that.
Oh, that's so true. And yeah, I think that that's a great point that you mentioned, because it's like, they're like, I think we're all always going through different things, but like, as you mentioned, I think it's about like how we approach the situation. And like, as you mentioned, like kind of taking it in a loving way or a loving message, like, especially if it's something like in our dream, we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't have such a good dream, or whatever. And like, kind of like making that proactive effort to try and do something better, to try and change the situation. And of course, there are certain things that we can change, but kind of thinking about like, what are some things that we can do things about, rather than kind of being stuck in the mindset of, oh, like, I don't want to say woe is me, but like sometimes I think it's easy to get stuck in that mindset, and like we end up feeling sorry for ourselves and not really like doing anything about it. And so I think it's, at least it's helped for me to focus on, okay, this is what I can control and this is what I can do
Yes.
in this moment, and focus on that rather than giving the energy to all these things I can't do anything about.
Yes, no, and I'm so glad you said that because it reminds me of, so whenever we immigrated to this country, I was undocumented for 28 years. And during those 28 years, it was like, okay, maybe I can apply and maybe they'll give me a residency or something. Denied. Maybe I can do this, denied. So it's like there were so many denials in those 28 years and so many stop signs. But it's like if I let that get to me and I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm just not becoming a resident, or I don't know how to do this. How should I go to college? How can I work? If I kept just looking at the negatives, I would have stayed there. I wouldn't have found a solution. But it was my mission. I was like, it's my mission that, and I know that something will work out for me. And it's almost this just this knowing, having this faith that is so strong that nothing can push it. It's like I knew, I'm like, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will become a citizen. I will be going to college. I'm going to be doing all of these things that I love and I enjoy. I don't know how, but I know I'll get there. So it's like just having that and knowing it was possible, Val, that really helped me. And some people might say, okay, well, they might even say it's delusional. Like, how can she be happy during these times? And I'm like, what other choice do we have? Do we want to be miserable and think we don't have an opportunity? And then because of that, we don't see opportunity? Absolutely not. We got to flip it. We got to flip that script and say, what do I want my life to be? And be so focused on this that nothing else matters. Like nothing is going to push us because we know we're going to get here, right? So I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think just remembering that it is possible for us. It's the biggest gift you can give yourself. Knowing that your dream is possible in waking state is a big gift for yourself.
Ah, that's so true. And I think it's so easy for so many of us to get caught up and thinking about like the worst case scenarios. And I know for me, like I've caught myself doing it, where like maybe it's like one bad thing that happened to us, and then like sometimes like we'll go down this rabbit hole of like then every like little thing, and then it kind of
Yeah.
compounds and grows, and it's just like, oh, I'm just so annoyed, and like it, the energy starts projecting itself, and then you find like aggravations or frustrations just like everywhere. And so like I have to like put it into practice. Okay, like I'm gonna come back from that, and it's sometimes it's hard to put that in practice. But I think, as you mentioned, like if we have a positive outlook, it does grow, and it does like expand, and it comes back to us too, versus like if we're always just like in this negative headspace.
Yes, yes. And if you happen to be in a negative headspace and you're like, how do I get out of it? Right? There's two options that have worked for me, and I'll share those. The first thing is, when you feel like you're in a negative headspace, I would say, okay, well, maybe it's like one bad thing that happened to us, and then because of that, we don't see opportunity. Absolutely not. We got to flip it. We got to flip that script and say, what do I want my life to be? And be so focused on this that nothing else matters. Like nothing is going to push us because we know we're going to get here, right? So I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think just remembering that it is possible for us. It's the biggest gift you can give yourself. Knowing that your dream is possible in waking state is a big gift for yourself.
Ah, that's so true. And I think
when I'm in that kind of heavier headspace, I don't do anything. I'm like, I'm not doing anything for a while. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to breathe, and preferably outside. Okay. If I'm in the sun and I'm like, I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just sitting here. Okay. Even though I'm mad and aggravated, just the fact that I'm outside, I'm on the grass, the sun is there, that kind of helps elevate me a little bit. Okay. Enough to get a little more neutral. So that's one thing. The other thing is this: if you're like, oh my God, I really don't know what to do, I'm so frustrated, do something completely different. Like, you can go for a walk. You can do an exercise that really takes a lot of energy out of you, because one of the things that we find is that when you're aggravated and frustrated, there's a lot of pent up energy in your physical body, right? So if you get yourself moving, get yourself sweating, let that anger and frustration go in a positive way for yourself. So let your body move like that. Okay. You can do that. And for some people, they can also do art, like really aggressive art or passionate art, right? But the idea is to do something completely different. So two options: you can either do absolutely nothing, be outside and just breathe with yourself, or number two, get yourself really active, maybe build up a sweat and let go that way. But those are like the two things that I do. If it's not one, it's the other. And sometimes it changes. It depends what I'm feeling at the time and what I think will be most effective for me.
Yeah, that's such a great way of looking at it. And I think it's like something that we all could always work on. It's a constant work in progress, I
Oh,
think.
yes.
I know for myself and for most people, I think it's something that we always like have to consciously remember to continue working on. But I was actually wanted to pivot just a little bit away from dreams for a moment, because I found your story is just so profound, and just a journey of absolute resilience. Would you be able to share with us that process that you went through when you went back to Mexico before you came back to the United States?
Yeah, that was not a fun process at all. And now I can tell it without crying, fingers crossed, okay? Because it used to be that whenever I told the story, I'd get very emotional, I'd start crying. And I'll tell you that the first time I told this story was in downtown Raleigh, okay? And it was somebody, and they invited me so that I would share my DACA story with them. And it was really interesting because it was a bunch of attorneys in there. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous to tell my story. But I went to the bathroom, and this girl in there, she could tell I was nervous. And she told me, she said, Carolina, everybody out there wants to hear your story. However it comes out, they are here to support you and they want to hear it. And when she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. And that was like the little push I needed to literally share it. But when I first shared it, it was really awkward and emotional. So, okay, let me go ahead and tell you. So, basically, like I mentioned before, I was in the US for 28 years before I had the opportunity to apply for residency. And now, before residency, they offered us DACA. That's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So, it means you can work legally at this point. You can apply for college. You'll still pay out of state tuition and all, but you can at least apply. So, it's really a dream come true, right? It's not the full citizenship, but it's something. So, I had DACA for some years. And then whenever I was working for Senator Blue, I worked with Senator Blue here before that, though, I was volunteering, but eventually I worked with him. And anyways, during that time and during law school, I got the letter, and the letter said that I had an opportunity to go and potentially get my residency. So I was so excited. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. I'm gonna like become a resident. It was so exciting. But anyway, the letter said you're going to have to leave the country and apply outside, like in Mexico. And Mexico is a beautiful place. Don't get me wrong, I'm from there, but I had not been back to Mexico. I had not been back in 28 years. I really didn't have conversations with my family at the time. So I was very much disconnected from my roots. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to have to go down there and see what happens. And Val, let me tell you something. Before I even went down there, because I knew that it wasn't guaranteed that I'd be able to come back home, I had like on a piece of paper, you have to have your case with you, right? You've got to have all these documents with you. But on the front, I had a piece of paper and I put on there Mission Possible. You know that movie Mission
Yeah.
Impossible? Yeah. Well, I put Mission Possible because I was like, oh my gosh, like I have got to get back here. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I have to get back here. And so that title really inspired me. And I'm like, this is literally a mission. So we went down there. It was just my husband and I. And what you do is, you stay at a hotel for some time, and then the interview process is kind of a lengthy one. So the first part of the process is you go and you get a physical done. They just check you, whatever, whatever. I didn't like it because when you go down there to get your physical, nobody's really asking how you are. You're kind of just another person in there. And it almost feels like, whenever you go and they check like cattle and animals and things like that. That's how it felt like, because in one of the rooms they put you in like six different desks. So I was in one of the six desks, and you put your little arm out like this, and they come in like an assembly line to take blood. And I felt so awkward. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. And like I try to talk to the people next to me, but we're not really supposed to be talking. But I wanted to like say something to feel human because it felt really weird. And so they do that, and then they separate you, and then you have to go and they check your chest and everything. So you completely undress. It's like a really legit physical, very uncomfortable. And so that's the first part of it. Then the other part is they sit you in a room, and it's like the actual interview part. And during the interview part, there's like hundreds of people with you. Oh my God, hundreds of people. And your family members, so like, for example, my husband had to wait outside of the building completely. So I'm in the building with hundreds of people in my row, in my little space there, and they start calling row by row. And so once they call your row, you have to walk to another building. And it's this building where that's where your interview takes place. And I always thought that in an interview, you would sit at a desk, somebody's in front of you. That's what I thought it was like. But it was more like when you go to the DMV and you're standing, though, you're not sitting. So you're standing, there's a little window here, and then the person is on the other side. And they have your case up, and they start asking you question after question after question. And it's really scary because while you're in line waiting to go, you actually can hear over the intercom if somebody's case was accepted or denied. And that part got me really sad because there was one guy that was like a couple people in front of me, and he was talking to us, and he was saying that he had three kids back home in the United States, and he thought his case was a strong one. So he was certain he was coming home. And that's kind of what you do while you're waiting in line. You kind of whisper and talk about your case to kind of uplift people. But when he went up there, they said he was denied. And my little heart dropped for him. I was like, oh my God. Oh yeah, right. Like my heart dropped for him because I was like, they didn't let him go, and he's got three kids over there and a wife. Like, that is horrible. So it hurt my heart. So already I was like nervous. I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to say to me? All I have is that I'm married to somebody and I'm going to school. And so I started to doubt my case. I started to doubt it. And then Val, in the line, oh my God, this part always gets emotional. In the line, I was like, okay, like I realize that I'm leaving my dreams to the side, because this was during a time where I was trying to do everything to please everyone except for me. Because I'm like, that's just what I got to do, right? But in that moment in line, I had this moment where I said, okay, God, okay, universe, I promise that if you let me come back home, that I won't push my dreams to the side, that I will focus more on my dreams. And it was like a really emotional time for me. So anyway, then they call me to go to the front of the line, and the lady starts asking me all sorts of questions. And I was so nervous now because I was like, oh my gosh, like, what if I forget the answers to my own life? Because when you're there, you really think like, oh my God, if you forget anything, if you say something wrong, they can just deny you because, maybe you're lying. So anyway, it was really stressful, but after they asked me question after question, I remember her later just saying, okay, you're approved. And I was so in my head about like trying to answer her that I was like, I'm sorry, did you say I was approved? And she's like, you're approved. You can move on. Like, she did not care at all. And I'm over here like, oh my God. So I start crying even more. I get all my little papers together, and I go outside, and I see my husband, and he's looking at me, and I'm crying, and he's like, what's going on? Because you're too excited, you're too emotional to say anything. And then he hugs me, and I'm like, we're approved. And then I cried again. It was like this whole crying scene, this whole crying scene. And as soon as we were done kind of crying, I call my family and I tell them, I'm like, guys, we're coming home, And then it was like all this excitement, all of this joy. And at the time, though, like I couldn't help but feel really guilty too, though, because I was thinking this was during a time in my life where like I would feel very guilty when good things happened to me because I thought, why is it that they said yes to me and they said no to him? He has 3 children. Like, what's the difference between us? I thought it wasn't fair. And I held on to that guilt for a really long time. But then I realized I'm like, I can't hold on to this guilt because if I do, then I'll be like frustrated, I'll be angry, I'll be upset at the whole system, right? And nothing good will come out of it. And so I said, I'm going to focus on what I said. I said I would focus on my dreams, I would focus on doing the things that I love. And so I did. And really, that is the push I guess I needed to do my little Lupita books, right? And it's really neat because our books promote family unity and they promote the Mexican Latino culture and they invite us to celebrate it with other people, right? Because I think that celebrating our culture with people who are of a different culture, that's the best way to do it because that in itself unites communities. So that's my immigration story.
It always touches me every time you do share your story, and it almost puts me at a loss for words, but I absolutely love your journey of fortitude. It's just so inspiring and impactful for anyone else who might be listening, especially who's going through something similar, and just hearing your story of resilience. And I can't imagine like how scary that that must have been, that whole process. Out of curiosity, if if for folks who weren't able to go home, what would that like look like? Is
Yeah, so if they're not able to go home, then they have to figure it out because
Yeah.
they don't give you money to start a life. They don't do anything. I think at that point, what you do is you start making some calls, start figuring out where you can live. If
Yeah.
you have family over there, maybe you can stay with family. But what ends up happening a lot of the time is that piece happens. They'll live with family or wherever they can. But then whoever is in the United States, they will continue to work and send money to them in Mexico while they get themselves on their feet. And it's different for everyone too, because some people might have been to Mexico before, so they know what to do, but others who don't, like they just don't, right? So it's different for everyone, but either way, it's really challenging because everybody that goes down there, they're going with the hopes of returning back to the US and they're doing it the right way. But even so, it's not guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, honestly, it's terrifying to just at the idea of going back someplace that you hardly know or don't remember and not being able to come back home. I mean, that's absolutely that's terrifying, and that's just amazing that you went head first into the unknown, knowing not knowing like what was going to happen or what the result would be. That's just incredible.
Yeah, well, I appreciate being able to tell the story. And I always think that like I won't be emotional because at first I start fine, but then later I get sad again. But it's just because yeah, it's been a long journey, but I'm definitely thankful for it. And also I'll say that even though there's resilience there, I still think my parents are even more resilient because I think about them sometimes like when I think of tough things that I've done like that, I'm like what they've done is even harder because they were over there in Mexico and they said we're going to leave this country, go to another country because we have these children and we want them to have a better life. So let's just go over there and see what happens. Like how do you do that? How do you leave all your family behind and do it? So it takes a lot of courage to even be able to do that. So I always think like if anything is challenging for me in waking state that I got to do, I remember them. And I'm like, look, girl, like you cannot not do this because you're scared, because your parents did things that are scarier just so you'd have the opportunity to do this. So that's also why it's like I'm constantly pushing myself to do better and to be a good example for kids around me, right?
That's amazing. And I feel like I can't speak for others, but I feel like for so many folks, there's a moment in our lives that like it's life changing. And I had a similar experience about 6 years ago where I long story short, I thought I was gonna die. And I had manifested this this energy where I just thought, okay, this is wrong with me. And okay, what else is wrong with me? Like, I'm not even 30 yet. What else is wrong with me? And I was just so scared about what was like gonna happen. I've shared with a few other of our guests that I had a cancer scare years ago. And so when I got that news, I was by myself at
Oh
the
my
end of the day
gosh,
at
Val.
work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I had gotten the news over an email. And so
Oh no, that's just
I
terrible.
was processing this information by myself, like, okay, before I even told anyone, I was just
Wow.
like sitting there like,
Is
okay,
this real? Like, is this a
yeah,
joke? What's going on?
yeah. And so I of course, I told my husband about it, and it was during like a difficult period in my life where I just there were so many other things like going on, but also it was like it forced me to just kind of stop and like reevaluate like everything that I was doing. And like I think anyone when they hear the C word they get scared. And so I was having other health problems at the time, and so I'm just like, okay, like, oh, like, what if I was doing like these scans on my liver because they had found liver growths, and they were monitoring it for about a year and a half. And so I had actually manifested, because I believe at the time I was in this mindset to where like everything was wrong with me, to where
Yeah.
I got to the point where I felt like I manifested physical pain in that
Oh,
area.
right. Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. This thing is wrong with me, and I don't know what to do. And
Wow.
so I was thinking, like, I was so convinced that like that life was gonna end for me. And so I was like, okay, well, I kind of got to a similar turning point where like, okay, well, please let it be nothing. And if it's nothing, then I'm gonna live my life to the best of my ability, like
Yes.
outside of expectations, and live my life how I want to live it. And and yeah, it's just like I feel like so many of us have these moments where it's just like nothing else matters. Like all these little things suddenly they just fade away, and they don't matter, and it's just like this one big thing. It's like you kind of become aware of just so many things that we're taking for granted, and like just the everyday little things. And so yeah, I think it's just for so many of us, sometimes it takes that moment to where it's just like going to be like lead into a life change,
Yeah.
and present our best selves, and really like push like what we want out of life. And sometimes that is it can, I guess it could be a good thing in that way, and pushing us to like always be bettering ourselves, and be better people in the world, and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think yeah, sometimes it takes those things, even as like they're really hard moments. Yeah.
I mean, definitely they are. And your story also shows how powerful the mind is, right? Because you
Yeah.
literally were like, okay, now I feel pain here. Now this is
Yeah.
happening. And maybe there was nothing there and you were creating this pain.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, wow, that's how powerful we are. So if we flip it and we give energy to something else, like how amazing is that too?
Yeah.
That always reminds me of that, and I think it's a good thing. And also I think you're right. It's like how we talked about earlier, if we're not doing something we enjoy and love, the universe is going to find a way to remind us like, hey, you sure you're going to do that, because this is an amazing thing here that you're not doing, and it'll remind us. And sometimes it takes those big kind of scares if we're ignoring it. And I can say, like, for me, for example, I was trying to do everything for everybody else and please them, but I wasn't pleasing me. And I was kind of putting myself last. And so I feel like, yeah, when we do that, the universe is going to remind us, like, oh, yeah, is that really how you want to live your life? Let's see if that's true, right? Oh my God.
That is so true. And kind of going back to dreams a little bit, have you had impactful dreams that maybe influence the decision or a particular direction in your life?
Yeah, throughout my whole life, I've had dreams like that. And so what I do with them is this, okay, if I have a dream and it's foretelling of something, it says, look, if everything continues the same way, this is a possibility. When things like that happen, I look at it and I'm like, do I want to see this? And if I do, I say I accept it and I let it be. But if I see it and I'm like, that's not what I want, like I want to see something different, then I have to do the practice of flipping it and thinking about what is the reality I do want to see. And then I give energy to that. So one that I suppose I can share. This is a little one. This is a little one from years and years ago. Before I met my husband, I was dating this boy. And I had these dreams about him. And in the dreams, he was like extremely controlling in the dreams. But in waking state, I'm like, I don't really think he is. I think he just really likes me, you know. But the dreams were telling me loving warning, loving warning. And so I listened to my dream and I said, okay, my dream is telling me to really look out for this person because there's something that the dream is amplifying, and specifically about him being very controlling. And at that time I was so young, I didn't think that was what was happening, but I trusted my dream enough. And so what I did was I broke up with this person. Okay. I broke up with this person in waking state. And when I did, it was bad because that person had actually changed schools to be at my school. And he would constantly follow me to like my color guard practices and my chorus practices. And he would even get his mother's car to like follow me. So anyway, waking state then showed me how controlling he really was once I broke up with him. But it's like at the moment, I didn't think he was. So I have used my dreams for that. If my dream says loving warning, time to create distance, I do. And for example, I'll give you a very recent one. This is with a friendship that I had. Now, in waking state, I started feeling this friendship was a little interesting. It was evolving into something that I'm like, I'm kind of uncomfortable right now. But I didn't want to be judgy. Okay. And many people could probably relate to this. You don't want to be judgy, you whatever. And so I kept putting myself in these situations and I'm like, I think maybe I'm just exaggerating. Okay. I wasn't listening to my little tummy at the time. I wasn't listening to my emotions. Well, I had a dream, and the dream said, you need some loving space because this person, it was almost similar to the boyfriend issue, but this was in a friendship. And the dream was warning me, letting me know that I needed to create loving space between me and this person. And I said, fine, I will do it. Right. But before I did it, then I started seeing how it was really happening in waking state and how this person was kind of trying to get me all to themselves and just not good, just not good. And trying to really involve themselves in my family and in things that were private. And that so for example, when I would say, I don't feel comfortable talking about this person would try to pry and get in there and really ask all these questions when I had already told them I'm not comfortable talking about this. And so I had to create loving space, and I love this person, but now there's a lot of loving space there. And I really don't talk to them anymore because of the dream. And because I've realized over time that my dream is simply amplifying the concerns that I'm already having in waking state. But oftentimes we're like, no, we don't want to be judging. No, maybe I'm exaggerating, right? But dream state says, no, you're not. Pay attention, pay attention. And so now I've gotten myself used to when the dream alert comes, I create that loving space. And then I'm almost prepared. I'm like, okay, whatever happens out of this, however they react, that's not my responsibility. I just know what I need to do to love myself. And so those are two examples of how I use my dreams specifically to guide me and to create loving spaces where necessary.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I know it's like for one, of course, the mind body being connected, and it's sometimes like I have started to notice like different emotions manifest in my body, even though if like cognitively maybe it's not quite there, but physically sometimes I'll feel it first before I can mentally understand like what's going on. And so and as you said, I think it's really sometimes like hard to kind of make those connections and kind of like remind ourselves that like we might need to take a step back and kind of reevaluate and sometimes that could be hard, especially when it's relationships, because
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that I'm still working on, is that like, for me, if like I'm trying to give space, is I'm always worried about, is that person going to be offended? Are they going to be upset?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was talking with someone on my podcast recently about this, and I'm like, yeah, I am like, I'm still like obviously continuing to work on this, but like it's like I think it stems from like, especially if we really care about this person and like we don't want them to be upset, but as you mentioned, like we can't control like how they react to it, and I think deep down, if this person does like really love us and really has our best interests in mind, that they won't be upset with us. And so I'm
Yes.
really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think you're right on with it, because if it's somebody that does love you and that also has your best interest. So like, so for me, for example, a good friend is somebody who takes care of themselves and has their best interest in mind, but then also loves you and has your best interest in mind. So if a good friend were to say, hey, look, I need a little space, there would be no reason to get upset, because they love me, I love them, and we just need a little space, and that's okay, right? But I think the issue happens when we do concern ourselves so much, and that, oh my gosh, how is she or he going to react? They really shouldn't react in a bad way. And if they do, that's a loving alert that lets us know, okay, they need to work on something that I have no control over, but they need to work on this. And now I'm not saying it's easy, it's not easy, but for me, I've learned that when I have these dreams, these loving alerts, I have to pay attention, because if I don't, I'll begin to see the thing that I was trying to say, the thing that my mind was saying, no, you're exaggerating, don't listen to that. Then it happens. And then I'm like, I should have listened to my dream. So I no longer wait for that moment. I'm like, got you. I feel it. Let's do this. And I create the loving space. And quite frankly, Val, I I don't care. Like this sounds really, yeah, this sounds really bad, but I'm finally at the point where I just don't care. If if their feelings are hurt by me saying I need some space and I say it in a loving way, I don't care if they're upset anymore. I used to care tremendously, but I don't anymore, because I really do realize that if they are a good friend, they'll create space. And I know this because I have two very good friends. They're essentially coworkers, but they're very good friends, spiritual friends. And they understand that when I say I need space, they give it to me. They don't care. Same goes for them. When they say, Carolina, can't do lunch today, can't do our hangout, no big deal. I get it, because you need you time, and that's cool. So it's like a line of respect, of knowing each other's boundaries and respecting those boundaries.
Yeah, that's so true, and so important. And especially since like I was especially like I feel like getting into the 30s, I think, is kind of when like I kind of started to realize, I feel like it's the time for so many people, like we look back, especially in our 20s, to like care less about what people think. And I think I'm kind of like starting to hit that. And especially we have these experiences that cause us to kind of reflect on life and like the bigger picture and what's most important has been a big thing for me. And so even if I logically know, well, I didn't do anything wrong, that's usually all it takes to be like, if this person has an issue with, you know, me setting expectations or a boundary or whatever the thing is, it's not like reflection on me, it's reflection of them, and there's nothing I can do about it, and I gotta move on. So
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
yeah, so before we close out, would you be able to share any success stories from anyone that you've worked with anonymously, of course, where a dream interpretation has played a significant role in their personal growth or decision-making process?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I think we have quite a few, because we have our dream team members. And what I like to do with them, I used to do lives on TikTok every Wednesday. We've recently done less of those, but our dream team members have been a really beautiful community. And oftentimes they'll share their different experiences with us and how dreams have helped them. So one of them in particular, I won't share her name, but she told me that she really wanted to connect with her grandmother who had passed away. And I told her about a loving practice that I've done and that my parents have done. And it's basically setting a loving intention before going to bed and just inviting them, saying, I invite you into my dream world. I invite you into my dream world with the energies of love, unity, and peace. And so she began setting these loving intentions before going to bed. And then one day she randomly just texted all of us in the dream team and said, oh my gosh, you guys, I was able to see my grandmother in my dream. Like I had a little conversation with her and I wanted to stay in there with her. And to me, that was so rewarding because, this is exactly what our dreamer wanted. She wanted just a moment to reconnect with her grandmother. And the fact that it was able to happen was amazing. Because I think it's important to remember that even though our loved ones pass away, their energy still continues and we're still connected to them. And then essentially too, like if we want to get all scientific and if somebody can explain this further, please do, but they're literally still like a part of us, right? Like the blood that runs through our veins also is similar to the one that ran through their veins. So I feel like that there's a beautiful connection that still continues there and we can access this in dream state. So that's one of them. And then the other one comes from our Spanish dream circle. So I had a dream circle meeting with our Spanish speaking community. And one of them was having a lot of trouble in her relationship with her father. And she was saying, look, in waking state, we're always arguing. There's never like common ground. And I said, okay, are you willing to talk to him in waking? And she said, no, I'm absolutely not ready for that. And I said, okay, fine. Okay, fine. Let's practice setting your intention before going to bed and have a lucid dream. Okay, when you have a lucid dream and you can see your father there, go ahead and talk to him there. Express how you're feeling in the dream because she was holding a lot of anger. There was so much resentment. And so she said that she was finally able, after many nights, this went on for like a month and a half, but when she was finally able to have a dream with her father, in the dream, she shared with him all of the things that were concerning her and she just vented. It was a space to vent. And even though it happened in dream state, what this meant for her was that in waking state, now when she looked at her father, she wasn't as mad at him as she had been because in the dream, she was able to vent through it. And whenever they ended the conversation on like hugs, like being able to hug in the dream, she realized that it felt healing for her. So it allowed her to be able to talk to him more in waking state. And those things that really angered her and made her really upset, she was at least able to touch the subject. So for me, that's a big win, right? It doesn't mean that the whole relationship was solved, but it means that it took those little tiny steps in the right direction. And I love those two stories, but I also want to share that all of like these stories and others are possible, right? We just have to be willing to pay attention to our dreams, number one. And then number two, we got to be brave enough to ask for those things we really want and let dream state help us. Because when we say let dream state help us, what we're really doing is we're saying, let mind, body, and soul be so connected to this universe that it shows me what I really need. It shows me what I really need to work on or what I really need to give energy to. So that's all we're saying here.
Oh, that's so true. And I know I've learned so much from you from these past several years and learning about dreams and kind of how to use my own kind of dream language to kind of understand what they mean. And I've had some amazing experiences from them, and I know our listeners will as well. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I hope it helps some of our listeners out there who are going through something similar. And this was just such a beautiful conversation. So I want to thank you for joining me today. If you could share with our listeners where we can find you, where we can connect with you and learn about everything that you do and all of that good stuff. I'll make sure I'll get that in the show notes down below.
Awesome. Thank you, Val. Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this podcast. And I want to congratulate you for all the beautiful work you're doing because you mentioned earlier that maybe you wanted to be a therapist at one point and all of that. But like you said, you're doing so much of that work here in a different and creative space. So that's really something to be celebrated. So if you haven't celebrated that, make sure to do it. And the other thing is, of course, you can find out more about all of my Lupita books on our website. The website is www.lupitainspires.com. You can find information on the books, but also you can book us for visiting your school or your organization. I've recently shared that we're going to be traveling across the US, so I'm open to visiting any state.
Awesome. I hope you make it out to California. We'd love to have you here.
Thank you. Hope so.
Thank
Fingers
you.
crossed.